Officer here at Blue Cross. And I am honored to be with you here today for an important conversation on the future of this region. So Blue Cross and the Chamber launched this series about a year ago following the Commonwealth's release of the Future of Work report. And over the past year, we've discussed downtown revitalization and small businesses, mental health and wellness, transportation, and our talented workforce. And as we wrap up the series, we wanted to convene regional leaders a year later to hear how and where they believe the region is headed. On behalf of Blue Cross, it's a pleasure once again to welcome you and to introduce today's panel. So first, we are thrilled to have Julie Kim, President of the U.S. Business Unit and U.S. Country Head of Decatur. In 2020, Julie was instrumental in bringing together the majority of the plasma companies to form COVID-19 Plasma Alliance in an effort to develop and manufacture a potential therapy to treat COVID-19. So thank you for the important work and welcome, Julie. Joining us next is Colleen Moore, President and founder of City Point Partners, a construction services consulting firm serving clients throughout Massachusetts. Since the firm's founding in 2009, Colleen has been guiding the firm through a period of steady growth, helping to build the firm's reputation as a trusted consultant who delivers quality work to clients while also serving as a great place for staff to grow professionally. Colleen is an advocate for small businesses in the transit and transportation industry and has been an active member of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Massachusetts, ACEC, since the firm was founded, chairing and or participating in the committees with the City of Boston and the MBTA. Currently President-elect of ACECMA, Colleen will serve as President in 2023. Thanks for being here, Colleen. And also joining us is Nav Singh, Senior Partner at McKinsey & Company. Along with being a senior partner in the Boston office, he is also the sponsor for McKinsey's Global Talent Attraction function and the leader in their life sciences and strategy and corporate finance practices with a focus on innovation. Before joining McKinsey in 2001, Nav was a laboratory manager at General Electric, where he helped to design manufacturing processes and to develop new polymetric materials and nanomaterials. Glad to have you here with us, Nav. Welcome. And next we have Scott Ozil, President and CEO of Commerce Inc. Love the pink trainers. Lovely. Scott oversees all of Converse's global business, leading the company as it maintains cultural momentum, enters new spaces, and reflects a modern and diverse and progressive culture. Before arriving at Converse, Scott was president, venturing an emerging brands group, VEB, for the Coca-Cola Company, where he was responsible for high-growth brands including Honest Tea, Body Armor, Fairlife Milk, and Topo Chico. We're thrilled to have you with us today, Scott. Thank you. And leading today's conversation is Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. Previous to the Chamber, Jim held executive-level roles and infrastructure projects that have transformed through the region, including Boston's Big Dig. Jim's previous roles include Executive Director of the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority, Chief of Staff for Mayor Menino, and Acting General Manager of the MBTA. Jim has been an active voice and leader around the topic of workforce development and policy regarding our state's competitiveness, continuously acting as a convener of public and private sector change makers. Given his robust experience, I can't think of someone better suited to lead today's conversation. We're honored to have all of you here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Jim, I'll turn it over to you. Let's get started.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. And first, welcome the panel. Great panel, please. And also, please join me in thanking Debbie and Andrew Rice and the team at Blue Cross Blue Shield for not only hosting us here today, but sponsoring this series. This is the final of a year-long series of discussions on this topic that we've had some fascinating topics around this issue of the future of work, workforce talent in the greater Boston region. When I think about this subject matter, I think we're in the middle of a grand experiment, and it's only year one, right? But this is all going to play out over the next couple of years, really, before we hit that new normal, whatever that might look like. I tell people on my team that, if they're waiting for the dust to settle or things to sort of calm down, that's a wait you'll have for a long time, because change will be constant, and this will all unfold. Flexibility seems to be the key word. As I look around the room, I'm guessing, this is an audience that decided to come into the office today. And so, yeah, I'll go to that event. One of the things we've seen at the Chamber is that's a big factor in events. Am I going to work? If I am, maybe I'll go to that event. So it has effects, this whole flexibility of the workplace, not just in the business of the Chamber, but in our communities and around core retail and other ways that we'll get into. But whenever I have these conversations, I'm mindful of studies that say that Massachusetts has the highest percentage of flexibility in terms of people working remotely and businesses and other organizations enabling this flexibility. But at the same time, 2/3, roughly, maybe even a little bit more of our workforce does not have that luxury. They are going to a place every day to provide us, in many cases, the goods, the services that we all need. So while we talk about flexibility and remote work and so forth, I always like to inject into the conversation that there's a lot of people out there that don't have that flexibility. And one of the questions is, what does that mean in terms of the people that do versus the people that don't? So let's get into the conversation. As I said, I feel like we're at the end of year one, maybe, of a 3-year, I've put 3 years on it, I don't know why, experiment in what's going to happen. The Commonwealth released a report that McKinsey was involved in preparing, some copies at the back of the room, I think, called The Future of Work. We thought the report was so meaningful that it shouldn't just sit on the shelf, so we created this series of conversations around it. But of course, the report was done in the context of the moment, and the thinking of the moment. But a year has gone by, so I guess I'm wondering, what have people seen? What have people learned just in that 1 year? So why don't I turn it over to the panel and ask them to reflect on that time last September when we thought we were all coming back to work. Omicron happened and we got slowed down a little bit. Then we started coming back again, and now here we are a year after the report, and some of these new rules, I guess, or the flexibility were put in place. So what have you seen over the past year? And maybe we'll just go down the line here. Julie, to take us out.
Sure. So maybe I will touch on 2 topics that were in the report. So first, in terms of, maybe we'll call it a continued headwind, so it's not a surprise, but the cost of living and particularly housing does make it challenging to attract talent into Boston. So I think that's only been exacerbated by the rise in interest rates that weren't anticipated this time last year, but where we are today, that continues to be a challenge. Now, on the flip side, when you do look at the talent pool that's available here, particularly for the life sciences industry, that continues to be a very strong tailwind. So across the life sciences industry, we had a 13% growth in employment last year based on a Mass Bio report. And for example, for Decatur, currently we have over 500 job openings in the Boston area today. So strong, significant growth still, driven by the talented labor pool that exists here in the Boston area, but continued challenge in terms of things like high cost of living and housing availability. So I'll stop there and let you.
So that's interesting, adding really non-COVID factors into this discussion, right? I mean, the housing costs can't be blamed on COVID, and the growth in the industry are not a factor of COVID. So when we talk about workforce and talent, we need to understand it's much more complex than post-COVID. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, when I think of the last year of coming back to the workforce, we've come back into a 3-2 environment, so blended. And really, as leaders, we've really had to flip ourselves from 2019 to 2022. As I say to my leadership team, we've got to create a pull culture, meaning that it's almost like, you're at a university, and we want this to be a really cool place, that we don't want you to live off campus, we want you to be on campus. But if it's not a pull culture, we're not going to make it mandatory. And what we really are intent is we want about 60% of our time to be spent together. In the world of fashion design, sports, athletic, we need to be touching things, collaborating. It's not just linear, get on something for an hour, solve a problem, move to next. But doing it in a way where it's forced fun, that's not going to work either. So as leaders, we really have to be really good at it. And so for some leaders, they struggle with it and have opted to go do something else. But leaders that are willing to put the work in and be very intentional about recruiting their workforce every day and making coming to the workplace an exciting place to be, that's what it takes in leadership today. It's a lot more demanding today than it was before 2020.
Yeah, that whole culture, I like that phrase. I've heard people use the term make it a magnet, not a mandate. Another way to think about that.
So my firm, we do a lot of the work for public agencies and municipalities. And over the last few years, our work has just grown because we do a lot of public construction oversight. So what we're actually experiencing is growing our staff, but there's a shortage of engineering and construction people out there. So what's happening for us is we're hiring, we're constantly recruiting, but there's a shortage across the board. So we're getting our staff recruited by our clients and our people that we're working with. And the salaries over the last 2 years have just escalated. So I'm constantly talking with my staff and looking at where we can be better at what we're paying our people. Because when they're getting phone calls saying, I can pay you 20 to 50% more than what you're getting. So we've gone through a huge effort in order to retain our staff by bringing in HR people to take a look at our salary profiles, making sure we're competitive. And I think in the past for us, we've always did provide a flexible work environment. We're a small firm, so how do we keep people to come and work for us when they could be working for large engineering firms or agencies? So we were always in a flexible mode. So when the shutdown came, we were able to pivot pretty quickly. But now everybody's flexible, so it's how do we create, how are we going to be different to retain staff? And it's a struggle all the time. We work really hard to try to find a place that makes them want to come in. And it's hard also, the virtual world. We were used to that, and I think that's good for us, especially in the construction world. You have to have people on the ground, but you can collaborate better now than you could in the past with the virtual. But that also presents problems where you've got people are commuting into the city. We want people to come into our office in Boston, and it's a 3 or 4 hour commute on a daily basis. And they're saying to us, well, wait, I can sit at home and be on my computer, but you want me to commute in and sit on my computer and be virtual as well. So it's a struggle back and forth, but we're listening to them. So.
We'll get to commuting. If you've ever been to an event with me, I'm going to talk about that. But Colleen, you somewhat amplified Julie's point about this being a much more complex issue than what was COVID, post-COVID, in terms of workforce shortages. It's not all because we had a pandemic that these workforce shortages.
No, and that's been, I think, the surprise. It's been the aging out, and there's not that middle row of people. We have a lot of younger people that are joining the company, and we're trying very hard to empower them and develop them professionally. Not easy, though.
So now, McKinsey was partnered with the governor's office on the study a year ago. Great piece of work. It's a year later, though, so what have we learned?
Yeah, so that was a scary moment when we were all going through that crisis, and this was humanity with the virus, and I'm glad we are doing on the healthcare side, although the economic side we still need to work our way through. When we did the report, everything was in a flux. As a good student of science, you'd always just go back to the report and read it. So I read it last night. And there were a few things that we got right, and a few things we didn't guess. So let me run you through the list of things that I thought we got right. And as I said, just not to brag, but more to talk about the trends that will play forward as we go along. office real estate was a big issue, is a big issue, and will be a big issue going forward. I'm not sure how that should evolve, but I think that is something to watch for. Childcare. People want to go back to work, but they need childcare. And unless you fix that issue, I don't think you'll be able to do that. Demand for public transit is going to be lower, and it has been. E-commerce will be high, and I think all of us have gained from it, because we can all place our orders and we go like to pick things up, or you don't have to come over. So I think life has been, in many ways, for those who can afford it, much better. For those who can't, that's an issue. Business travel, we said, will go down. I do not fly over for a meeting for 1 hour anymore, right? I can Zoom, or I can, and I think all of us are doing that. It's slowly coming back, but I hope it stays slow. It is good for the environment. Although some people in the travel industry may not agree with that. Impact on housing. I think you're right. This was going on for a long time, and nothing new. But COVID made it worse. It made it worse because interest rates dropped. Suddenly, your mortgage payments are much lower, and it also expanded the reach, because you could go towards the west and get a cheaper house, but now you can't because of the price has gone up. That will get readjusted. And we thought that the workforce will need to be reskilled, especially in healthcare. There was a huge need for healthcare workers. So I think those are the things that I think that report is quite accurate on. What we do not anticipate, I think, was this Tuesday through Thursday traffic peak. And so we didn't realize that people would want to work from Tuesday to Thursday. So I think that is new, and that will need to be adjusted. And some of us thought that the automation would happen at a much faster clip, that you'll have many more jobs automated away. Now, if you watch Elon Musk and Tesla and there's humanoids and Boston Dynamics, so robotics will come in a much bigger way. But that pace of automation, while it has picked up, is still not there where it is possible, which will have impacts on jobs and all of that. So I just reflect on this because as you do the work, you don't know how it's going to play out. There are some things that seem to be right, and there are some things that need to evolve.
And now, a quick follow-up on that Tuesday to Thursday peak. Everyone talks about that. You know, I think about human behavior, and you go to the supermarket, you look for the shortest lines. Are people going to shift again and say, you know what, Wednesday is terrible, I'm going to do something different? Do you think that'll be another trend?
I think that could happen, right? Because like for me, I mean, I find it useful to come on Mondays and Fridays because I'm not stuck in traffic, and I can, right? But I think this is, again, it goes back to the future of work. It depends on the work. If you were in healthcare, you were always in the clinic, right? If you are in manufacturing, you're in the plant. If you're in the labs, you're in the labs. If you're in construction, you're in construction, right? So there is a good part of the economy where hybrid and flexible and remote is, what are you guys talking about, right? It is people who work in the offices where this conversation is much more interesting.
And by the way, I can vouch, this was the craziest business traveler in Boston over here. He would tell me he was flying to Europe for a 1-hour meeting and then coming back the next day, and I'd say, no, that's crazy travel. What are you doing? So I'm glad to see you moderated your behavior.
It's good for the environment.
So,
If I may,
yes,
the other thing that we're starting to see more flexibility, and I think in some places this existed prior, but for many it came on as post-pandemic behavior, is that Tuesday, Thursday may be the busy days, but that doesn't mean everyone's coming in, driving, to be in the office by 8:30 or 9 and leaving at 5:30. So there's a lot more flexibility, and people are adjusting their days accordingly. So I'll do calls in the morning from home first, and I might go into the office mid-morning so that you don't have the challenge of commuting. So I think that type of flexibility is also something that's becoming more prevalent.
so humans are responding, and managers have to understand and think about what that flexibility means.
Jim, one hook, I thought made a great point. What people, a lot of times like us, don't talk about is the inequity of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because the thing about it is, like, during the pandemic, I would get the mental health of all our folks that are like in their kitchen or in their basement or in their media room, but the folks in the plant, the folks in the distribution centers, the folks that are in the retail stores, like to your point, what's the problem? Like, and there was no vaccine. And so, even today, when we still talk about it, it's for us, it's 35–40% of the workforce. 70%, they don't. It's not even a discussion point. They not. Let me just forget those. But the net is they don't go to work. They don't get paid.
Yeah, that's an issue I think a lot about because of what you say, Scott, the inequity and how that will play out within workforces or businesses themselves, but within society more broadly. Where there's one group that have that, quite frankly, privilege and flexibility versus others. To be seen in, I guess, this grand experiment. I mentioned at the beginning that the ways that our workforces and our businesses respond to this moment has other forms of effect, and one is on the vibrancy of the downtown. I work in a financial district. You can walk around and see ground floor retail that hasn't come back yet. Anyone in retail knows that's a numbers game, right? I mean, the demand has to be there. Scott, you and Congress supported the Lovejoy Wharf revitalization. Tell us about that. I know you're working with the trustees of the reservation as it relates to this issue of downtown.
Well, I wasn't CEO prior. We were based in Andover, which I know is an amazing location. But the thesis of moving into the wharf and redoing it was that we wanted to be in a workforce where folks could ride their bikes to work, skateboard to work. The world that we live in, those are our consumers. That's the people that work in our building. And then being part of a vibrant area that has cool restaurants, boxing boutiques, road studios, that's the lifestyle of our 700 people. And so we're back in it, and I see the rowers out there every morning doing the road class, the boxing studio's packed, the restaurants are all there. The challenge that many of these facilities have, they don't have the staff to support actually the demand that's there. I mean, not that I want to call anyone out, but it's just, I know the pre versus post, but being part of the downtown, whether it's here or in Shanghai, Amsterdam, our offices around the world, is critical to our workforce, and that's still our strategy.
Yeah. Colleen, you're in engineering and construction. Tell us about what Scott mentioned, the changing urban landscape and how it was affected by the pandemic shifts that you're seeing here in Boston.
So most of our work is across Massachusetts. So we have a lot of staff who will work outside of the Boston area. But in the construction world, the changes that we've seen are, the prices of materials. And so it's impacting the work that we're doing because we'll be advising a municipality on a project that they've gone out to their residents and they've gotten approval for funding. And then it's a year later, and then we're trying to talk to them about the fact that the costs have gone up, right, and the labor costs have gone up, and it impacts the ability to get the work done. But within Boston, I would say the biggest thing for us, it's a very relationship-driven work that we do. And for being in Boston, we need to be able to be visible to our clients. And a lot of the clients, they sit over at 10 Park Plaza, so it's the MBTA and MassDOT, and I was over there the other day, there was nobody there. And, so when we're trying to entice, we want to be visible to our clients, we need to be face-to-face with them, and you can't do that virtually. So if we can get more of the agencies back, if we can get more of our other clients, which are the engineering firms, back, we need that face-to-face time. It's hard to build relationships. And the younger staff tend to be the people that are in our Boston office that we're trying to also entice back into the office, regardless of the commute, because we want to promote them and empower them to also have that face-to-face. And you can't build those relationships across a Zoom meeting. You just, that casual conversation that you can have as you walk into a meeting or as you're leaving a meeting, and I think that's critical, and I think it's critical as we try to get people back into the city. And I think this is what actually seeing us start to come back to these types of events is going to be what's going to draw people back in.
So commuting and mobility, transportation, has come up several times already, not surprisingly. So let's deal with it. What are you seeing, hearing from your workforce? He shut down the orange line, green line for a little while and continues to have some issues. Commuting times weigh on people. What are you hearing from your workforce?
Yeah, so I'll answer that
for two different groups of people, right? So we also have manufacturing sites, labs, centers where people do have to come in every day, and it is a much bigger burden for that population. So we provide a subsidy in terms of to our employees for public transportation, but when it's not available, you have to figure out how to get there, and it just adds to the time because it just takes that much longer to show up on site. Then when you look at those who come to the office, this is where I would say it's used as an excuse, right? Orange line is down. I'm not going to be coming to the office for the next however many. Right? So it is a barrier, particularly for, we're based in Cambridge, in Kendall Square, and so parking is not easy. We have roughly less than 50% parking spaces for our employees who come to the offices. So we heavily rely on public transportation, or our employees rely on public transportation. So it is an impact in terms of adding a bit more friction, right? And we're all trying to remove the friction, as you say, create that pull. So anything that puts more friction into the system makes it that much harder for employees to come in. And then when you're looking to attract talent, that's another aspect. They look at what's the reliability of the public transport system, what's the commuting times, where can I afford housing? So it all compounds, and you end up having the dialogue of, well, can this be a remote role? And that wasn't something that a couple of years ago would have been a conversation. It would have been, oh no, you come to Boston, but now it's like, well, can I work remotely? Because all these things are difficult.
Scott,
No, I was going to say, it's interesting. It's that the world we live in today, at least for the corporate workforce, if we had done this in 2019, like we'd all be president or highest engagement scores, all that stuff. But and when I read some study that whether it's 6 weeks or 6 months, you learn a new normal, and the new normal is I'm actually home every night for dinner. I get to help my kids with my homework. I get to go to the soccer game. I can walk my dog at lunch, but still get my job done, right? So therefore, when there's anything that creates, I love the word friction, it just becomes, well, it's not worth it. Like it's the constant trade-off of what the new balance of life is. And I think, what the buzz kind of I hear, in the gym or the office or whatever, when folks, there's not as many trains as used to be. They don't run as frequently. I don't, I'm walking by. I don't know like what the real deal is. But I think to Julie's point, it's that it just creates a little bit more tension on just trying to find that balance. But what's interesting is, I had an employee probably 4 or 5 years out of undergrad, bumped into him, and I sent a note out on return to office or something, and he wanted to share his thoughts with me, basically that as he was coaching me, that if I had said the word mandatory, any of these kind of red line words, like he was going to quit. And then he's sitting next to me in the gym, and I'm like, kind of then I looked at I asked him what he did. He said he worked in an area that's fully remote, like he didn't even have to be. So I kind of was like, well, man, why do you have this kind of issue with me? You don't even have to be here. And he goes, well, I come here 3 days a week because, I like the gym, the wind down Wednesdays, ice cream Thursdays. I mean, it's like, I'm not missing that. And, and why do Zoom when I can be with people? And then, so it's like, I like the fact that I get to do it on my time and on my schedule. And he said, Scott, as long as we keep it that way, man, I'm all in. But the minute you start telling me what I have to do, then there's a lot of other options out there. And it was great hearing that from a 3.5-year employee coaching me on how I should write my memo differently. But it was instructive. It was really instructive. And, it's like you live every day because it's like we're trying to be better leaders to recruit folks to be inspired to be there, not because the way we used to work. The other knock-on effect that we've learned is that for 150 years or whatever it's been, we didn't realize in everyone's job description, apprenticeship was a part of your job. Meaning that there's a weight that you create by being there 5, 7, 10 years that the next generation gets. And when you go to Zoom, for that 5 to 10 year and 15-year employee that says, I'm never gonna be CEO, I know how to do my job, I can do it in my kitchen, that weight doesn't happen. And for the next generation, they don't learn how to kind of operate. And so another reason why we need people back in is for the people to learn what happens between the meetings where you can say, let me tell you why we did this and what you do differently. And we don't feel it yet, but if you don't get people back in a non-Zoom environment, there's gonna be the next group that's gonna miss out on so much that was never part of the job description, what we all benefited from, even if it was the old way of working.
I think you're right, Scott. There is a lot of reverse generational mentoring going on these days in workplaces. Colleen?
So,
The majority of the staff that we're trying to get back to our office, you know, at the end of the day, we provide a service to our clients. We deliver information, whether it's a cost estimate or a schedule. And our mantra has always been, you need to be able to serve our clients, deliver the product that they're looking for. I don't care if you do it in 2 days, 3 days, as long as you deliver what we're contracted to do. And if you can work your 40 hours, because most people are a 40-hour employee, you know, you can work it in whatever manner, as long as you can deliver what we need to the client. So if you can do your 40 in 3 days or 4 days, that's the most important thing, the flexibility, and giving people the ability to make that decision. Again, with what you were saying, come in when it works for them, works for their commute, works for their children. Right now I have a woman who, she's early 30s, she has a small child, her husband's been deployed to Germany for the last year, and he'll be back at the end of the year. So every 6 weeks, she flies to Europe, and they meet somewhere in Europe. So a couple of days ago, she flew there Tuesday evening. She'll be working from London over the next couple of days, and she'll fly back on Monday. That's what works for her, and she's probably more productive than other people that show up every day, because we're giving her the ability to live her life and give her the flexibility that she needs to have her work-life balance. And I think that's key to everybody that works in the company, even the ones that have to be on site because it's a construction.
Now, in your earlier comments, you mentioned that you thought about it, and McKinsey thought about it, this issue of public transportation mobility. You double down on that finding of your Talk to us about
Double down, triple down, quadruple down, name it, right? So I think, look, this is not a new issue, right? This has been on for a long time. Jim, as you ran this place, I mean, this was issued 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It was issued 20 years ago.
Golden era.
Was issued 10 years ago. I know there's been new restrictions soon. I'm sure they'll put a little more energy into it. It'll be issued 10 years from now also, is my guess, and 20 years from now. So I think if you were to bet, I don't think the transportation issue will be solved like this. They will need constant investment. We need to keep on doing things. I think in the last 10 years, I've seen great progress being made. We need to keep investing. I think we're limited by the people. How much enough people do all the work to get invested? Right? So we need to get the workforce to enable these investments also. But to me, the trick we are missing is technology. So again, I don't like to take names, but Uber and Lyft, in the grand scheme of things, they reduced the cost of a ride, got many more people into the workforce, created enough jobs for them also, by the way, because I interviewed every Uber and Lyft driver I drive with, they're typically quite happy about that, because they have flexibility, right? They can do what they want. I think we are not leveraging technology enough in my mind. So for example, I'm enthusiastic about Uber-like taxis that you're talking about now, right? I have no idea when they'll come. Hopefully they'll be robust one day, right? Because one should be able to pick people at home, pick 4 or 5 people along without a driver and take them to wherever they need to go. That to me is a vision that is real, is solvable, and we need to unleash our entrepreneurs and technologists to drive that. Because if we do that, that is how you fundamentally change it. Otherwise, 10, 20 years from now, we'll still be talking about this, and I think most of us will be gone in this room, but that's going to be evergreen like topic for a long time.
Love that, this thought of thinking about these challenges, but unleashing innovative solutions at the same time. Nav, I want to stick with you for a minute. McKinsey recently released an article, "The Great Attrition is Making Hiring Harder. Are you searching the right talent pools?" The article discussed how the great attrition has become the great renegotiation, meaning that previously, what previously drove individuals to stay in a job and to go to a job isn't the same anymore. Talk to us about that. What are the new, what are the findings, and what's changed about attracting and retaining people?
So I think I just share the context that the last recession we had was 2007, 8, 9. And there's a generation that has come through which has not been through a recession yet. I hope this one we're talking about is a soft landing, as one would hope. But there's a hard landing that is also possible. But the Great Resignation, in my mind, has already reduced some. If you look at attrition, I'm not sure about all of you, the attrition has begun to drop. The number of job openings, for those who saw the results yesterday, dropped by 10% almost. Right? So there's a dramatic change that is ongoing. So we think beyond the Great Resignation, which happened last year, now is a mode of great attraction. Right? You are in a mode to attract the business talent. People are looking for a specific workforce. They're looking for people who are trained in AI, who are trained to do other things with the right skills. So to us, the game is about, here is an opportunity to attract the best possible people you need for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I think that is a change that is ongoing. I think this whole thing around remote and only focusing on the office space that we're talking about, people who work in office, there's this debate about remote, hybrid, or in-person. I think beyond the work we're talking about, it would depend upon the management style, upon the leadership style, upon the needs of the work. And I think we should let people pick wherever they want to go. But in terms of the talent pools, the talent pools are now much broader. You can hire people around the world. Some may want to be remote, and you can adjust your work to remote, that works out. But I would say that attrition is likely dropping, the resignation will likely fall, but this is a moment for the great attraction to get the best possible workforce.
Lily, I want to come back to you and ask you about attracting talent. But first, just to, I guess, make sure we're all grounded in the same context, I do want to talk a little bit about Decatur, Massachusetts, because I'm not sure everybody knows. Decatur is the largest life sciences employer in Massachusetts. So if you think about a state that prides itself on being a global leader in life sciences, this is the largest employer, continuing to grow and invest in Massachusetts even through the pandemic. In the last 2 years, Decatur announced the creation of a Kendall Square campus with a lease of 585 3rd Street, broke ground on a cell therapy manufacturing facility in Lexington, opened a new R&D cell therapy facility in Cambridge, completely renovated Cambridge's iconic 500 Kendall building, and opened several source plasma donation facilities throughout Massachusetts. So this is an impact player in not just life sciences, but in the Massachusetts business community more generally. So, we talk about Massachusetts' competitive advantage being talent and its workforce, but in this world of hybrid working, how did hybrid work play into the decisions to grow in this way, in the challenge of continuing to attract talent in such a highly competitive market? How do you make it more collaborative and innovative experience for people that, as you said, come into the office, but also those that are working remotely? How do you do all that?
Yeah, so, as you said, we are a large employer in Massachusetts. So we are approaching 7,000 employees across the state. And on the one hand, when you look at what we do, right, we take innovative science and we turn it into medicines for people who don't have effective treatment today. So that in itself is a pretty amazing purpose to have as a company. So that attracts a lot of people because when you look at the workforce today, it's not just about a paycheck. They want to know that they're contributing to something, that they're part of a larger purpose in society, and we can provide that. So that's I would say the starting point. But then when you look at the challenges of hybrid working, so we do have a very mixed population. So we have, for example, hourly employees who work in the manufacturing sites, who work in the plasma donation centers. We have very highly educated, double PhD scientists who work in our labs. So it's a very, very diverse workforce. And as a company, we can't ignore any single group. So when we look at our flexible ways of working, some of it applies a lot more to certain populations, but we do try to make sure that we are doing things that are
valuable for all of our employees. So when we talk about flexible working, that component, it's about making sure that you're doing what needs to be done from a work standpoint. So we're not mandating, for example, you must be in the office on these certain days. It's up to the manager to figure out what's the best way to do the work that the team needs to do. And so it depends on what the team is doing. Right? If you're just kicking off a major project, you may want to spend a lot of time together so you can align on objectives, you can figure out the work streams, but then as the project moves on, maybe people can work more remotely. Or if you've got new people coming on board, absolutely, you need to be in the office face to face, because otherwise, how do you onboard talent? That was one of the biggest complaints when we were fully remote. Onboarding was a horrible process for most people. You just don't get the same type of interaction and relationship when you're just seeing someone on a little flat screen versus having face-to-face interactions. So that's driving how we define flexible working. The other pieces, for example, around well-being and supporting belonging, that is driven by your environment and the type of work that you're doing and the teams that are around you. So we want to make sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all, that we're doing things that support every employee, regardless of whether you're coming in every day on the manufacturing floor, and you've got the flexibility to work from home or not, because you're an office-based employee, or you're in our labs driving the science. Sometimes you can be in, sometimes you may not. So I think it's really trying to look at holistically, what are we doing to support all of our employees and not over-indexing on one versus the other, but also being humble enough to know that we don't have all of the answers. As you said, we're all experimenting. So we've also been very committed to saying, we're going to look at data, we're going to ask you, we're going to ask for your opinions, we're going to look at usage of meeting rooms and all sorts of different data, to the point there's lots of data that's available now. And we'll keep adjusting based on what our employees tell us.
Julie, you've given us some tremendous insights into your leadership style, and one of the answers earlier some of the other panelists have as well. But I'd like to probe this issue of, how your leadership style has changed in response to this experimental moment that we're in.
First, answering a lot of questions, I don't know. They didn't train me for this. I think about, I was listening to Julie and we talk, is that, a year ago, for a year and a half, 80% of the meetings I'm in is, how are we going to get back in the office? And I remember another week, when are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? All the complications of it. But what's really interesting about it is that, and I come from the world of, I don't want to be told what to do, so let's create a lot of flexibility. But the challenge is that I think as leaders, you have to declare what kind of culture you want to create. I do think that if you leave it up to everyone to make their own decisions, what happens is that depending on the leader's life stage or if they can be introvert, extrovert, they might decide we don't need to be in the office. Let's just say that. But that might not be what's right for the next 5 to 7 years for that work group. It might be right today for that individual. So as you start getting into all that nuances, I think at the top, you have to kind of declare, and you don't always have to say it, but you've got to set kind of the pace. Because everybody looks to you, and you're gonna kind of nudge, pull, incent, and hopefully, as I said to my leaders, that hopefully if we start getting it right, we'll get 80-85% of the herd going in a certain direction. And then the 15% that aren't there, we might have questions like, maybe this is not your troop, maybe this isn't your herd, or whatever. But I'm not talking about 5 days a week in the office. I'm just saying, whatever that culture is, we as a leadership team have to decide what is the culture that is the fabric that's going to make our brand amazing. And what are the kind of people that we want to be a part of that culture? And let's role model it and make the pull as exciting as possible. And then the 85% that all have jerseys that want to be a part of us, let's run with them. And the 10 or 15% that say, I don't like that, I want to be in Montana, I want to ski in France, whatever it is, then we have to, but let's not solve for that. Because for a year and a half, we were solving for, Scott, if we come back to the office, nobody's gonna ever come back to work. And we just found that just not to be the case. But flexibility is what people are looking for. They're looking for inspiring locations. They're looking for a brand and a company that has a purpose, that has a soul, that matches their values. All those things are what they're signing up for, and that still has not been lost to the pandemic.
Colleen, not only do you represent engineering construction on this panel, but amidst Decatur, Congress, McKinsey, U.S. small business representative as well.
I noticed that, yes.
So talk about the challenges from a small business perspective in terms of this issue of the new demands on leadership, the flexibility of the offices, and I don't know, are there advantages to being small?
There definitely is, there are advantages as well as a lot of disadvantages, but I think I totally agree with everything that you had just said, because they expect you as, especially the owner or the CEO of the company, they want to know what are your goals and how are you going to lead the company, and they do need that. They don't want to be left on their own devices. But for my company, when I first started, we'll be 14 years next April, I had more of an older group of people. That was what I was able to hire. There was, a lot of available talent back 13 years ago. And most of it were probably senior people, and I had an older group of people that were working there. Half the company now are all under 40 years old. So for us, the dynamic has changed, where now we're dealing with a much younger group of people, much more highly educated. They're looking for different things, and as the leader of the company, it's been important to make sure that we understood and understand that there's a different dynamic. And how do we manage the different dynamic? Because it's very different when you've got a bunch of 25 to 35-year-old people and what their goals are. They're in a different phase of their life, and we have to recognize that. And so for us as a smaller firm, where we're trying to retain our staff because they are being recruited by engineering firms or agencies, it's important to listen to them and make them be part of the table, have a place at the table. And so right now we're going through a whole our business planning process. And this is the first year we've took every single group, we take each group, put them in a room and say, okay, what are we doing right? What are we doing bad? Where can we improve? What are your talents? What do you want to see the company be in the next 2 to 5 years? And how do we utilize you to help us grow? It's not about me. I'm sort of on the older side, obviously, but how do we grow this company for you and your future? And I think in including them in the process has been pretty eye-opening for us, and I think more eye-opening for them. Because some of the companies that they've come from, nobody asked them that question. Especially big construction companies. The younger people, they're not always asked, what do they think, but what do they want to do? So I think it's important for us as a smaller firm to engage them early and often.
Ab, I'd be interested in how your leadership style might have changed, but more, well, as much, what are you advising clients on this question of leadership style in this moment?
So I think I would agree with all the things that have been said here. 100% on board. I would add in 2 things. I think one is around the empathy. We talk about childcare. Childcare is not solved yet, right? We have lost the muscle of taking care of our kids and coming to work and going back and forth. But that muscle took some time to build. I look at moonlight travel, right, to your point earlier. I used to have a suitcase with the car used to be there. Okay, fine, the car is ready, pack and go, right? Now I need to plan for almost 2 days ahead. What do I need? Is that packed or not? So, but it takes some time. And I think the childcare we have to figure out how to solve for, because without that, and we be understanding for our colleagues who may not have that childcare in place. So they may not have as much flexibility as we may want. So I think that's one caution. I think the second, in terms of leadership style, the one experiment which I tried, which has worked very well, which I'm going to hold on to forever, is to block out half an hour on your calendar to call people you've not seen recently. And in a hybrid work environment, remote environment, they love that call. They love that call. So I think I would say like empathy is the single biggest thing to understand where people are coming from, what their needs might be. I think the advice to the leaders is that, look, there are so many complications out here. I think Julie, Scott, Colleen all talked about 3 different contexts and how they reacted. I honestly am very careful in advising clients on this topic because the answers are not straightforward. It depends. And you don't want a consultant to come and tell you it depends. So I'm personally very,
Well,
yes. So I'm very cautious of doing, but unlike some of my colleagues are much more proficient in this, I personally am very careful on advising on this topic because the answer is not straightforward.
Julie, I want to come back to you. Now mentioned earlier a response to these challenges, the unleashing innovation, which we're good at here in Boston and in Massachusetts. In fact, Boston, Greater Boston, Cambridge, world renowned for healthcare and life sciences innovation. You have global experience, and I'd be interested what you see as emerging areas for innovation and growth in your industry. And with this growth, will this growth help maintain our competitive advantages for other regions? But beyond that, what types of skills and talents will be needed to meet the demands of this key industry in Massachusetts?
Yeah, so maybe two thoughts I'll share here. One that is specific to the industry, but one that Nav touched on that's not necessarily specific to pharma. So for us, the key is following the science. Where is the science going? You don't want to be necessarily focused on an area that isn't driving the latest round of innovation. So when you look at the news these days, the bulk of it is in cell and gene therapy, right? So the companies that have robust pipelines, they all have something in cell and gene therapy. And so as Decatur, that's an area that we've heavily focused on. And you've already mentioned a number of our investments recently that we've chosen to make here in the greater Boston area because of the ecosystem that exists, because of the science that comes out of the universities, because of the small biotechs. It's all here, and being co-located, there is that, if you want to call it, there's that ecosystem that you can work within that makes it much easier versus if we were headquartered in Dallas, Texas, for example. Nothing against any Texans in the room or anyone from Dallas. But you
I may repeat that.
But you just don't have that same ease of being able to partner and work together and drive the science. So going back to the word that I used earlier, it takes a lot of friction out of the system, and it makes it much more, makes it easier to collaborate and drive scientific innovation. The other piece that I would say, it's really around data and technology. So that's what I'm saying. Matt mentioned it earlier. This is not unique to pharma. I think we're actually a little slow vis-a-vis other industries in terms of embracing that technology and how it can change not only the way we work, but the way that we interact with all of our stakeholders. So when you look at, for example, how clinical trials are done, they've been done the same way many years. But now we're looking at, okay, how can we leverage data and technology to do this in a different way that is easier for the individuals who have to participate in the trials, for example, and the centers who have to run the trials. So anything related to data, analytics, insights, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of that, digital, that's an area that for pharma, we are also trying to build up those capabilities. So as I said, we've got over 500 jobs available today, so if you're interested, come apply.
So I should have done this 5 minutes ago, but I opened it up to some audience questions. So if Jay will let me stay in the room for 5 more minutes, so maybe we'll try to take a couple of questions before we wrap it up.
Hi, thank you for a great time today. I work in the workforce development space, and one of the things I'm curious about is, so my company works with underserved communities, helping people get access to employers and education and employers. A lot of them don't have the resources or the time to do a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree. A lot of them go through certificate programs. So I'm kind of curious, when you look at your talent pipeline, there's usually a proclivity towards, hey, I understand this boxes, a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree or whatever. How do you see yourselves and others in your area being more flexible, kind of in your onboarding or looking for that talent?
Who wants to take that, Julie?
I'm happy to, look, that's an area that we are focused very heavily on at the moment. So clearly there are some things, like if you're working in our cell therapy lab, you need to have some level of expertise to work in the lab. But one of the questions that I asked our HR team is, why do we require a 4-year degree for every single role in this company? That doesn't make sense, right? And so, going back to something that you said, Scott, in terms of apprenticeship, I think that's a way that we can create pathways into the life sciences industry, especially for people who are coming from underserved areas and underrepresented talent, to create that entryway into a potentially life-changing type of career. And simply because you don't have a 4-year degree doesn't mean that you don't have the capabilities to succeed. So we are thinking through how to work with organizations. We're talking to Mass Bio, Mass Life Sciences Center, and others to figure out, okay, how do we do this? Because there should be a way to create those pathways in and offer very attractive, high growth career opportunities for underrepresented talent.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, good morning.
We'll do you, and then we'll do one more, and then we'll close it up.
I'm Jonathan Allen. I'm co-founder and director of development at Leadership Brainery. And we are working to increase access to graduate school as a pathway to management level and leadership roles in the workforce. And so I definitely agree that there is this context of everybody don't have to go to college, have a 4-year degree, but we look at management level and leadership roles, and there's an overwhelming number of people who do have graduate degrees, master's and doctoral degrees. And so want to ask, so what are you doing to diversify management level and leadership roles and still closing wealth gaps and opportunity gaps by focusing on getting more underrepresented communities through those pathways as well?
Yeah, if you looked at my leadership team of my 23 direct reports, over 40% of my leadership team is diverse or from different communities. So if you look at our leadership team, the top 100, almost 50% are underrepresented communities. But the net is, it's everything from pipeline to where you recruit to creating different avenues of getting talent into the organization and making sure it's a place that not only you recruit, but it's a place that people want to be a part of. And that gets to the leadership style, it gets to the fabric of the culture, it gets to when there's issues around the world, are you a company on the sideline? Are you a company trying to drive progress? What's your voice? All these things help bring an inclusive workforce. What I think about as leadership is that, for many leaders, they believe in, this is what a great leader looks like, and I'm gonna pull 67, 70% of the workforce with me, and the other 30% needs to conform to the 70%. If they don't, they must not get it. Really good leaders figure out, how do I lead to the 100? And that means that I gotta meet people where they are, have more empathy, have a situational approach that really brings everyone along. And what we found through the pandemic, I sit on a number of CEO forums around the world, a lot of CEOs are opting to retire because they're like, I'm not prepared to actually become that CEO. They didn't teach me for 25 years to do that. That's a new skill that I don't want to put in. But I will tell you that leaders that want to do it, they're going to make them more inclusive workforce.
Thank you. Good morning. This has been fascinating. This has been really terrific. I'm Deborah Smith, and I am at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, part of the EILH hospital system. And my question is really coming from this sector, albeit there isn't direct representation of the panel from folks from healthcare. I would be curious as to what your thoughts would be regarding workforce transformation for this sector. Both MGB, Massachusetts General Brigham, and the ILH, of which I'm a part, are the two largest employers in the Commonwealth. 70,000 plus for MGB and 30 35,000 plus for EIL. So, yeah, what thoughts might you have for the sector who is particularly faced with, as you're well aware, challenges of job shortages, but yet who want to be eminently viable from an innovation perspective, from a patient care quality perspective, from an equity perspective? I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have thoughts, I'm not sure they're helpful. But I think the bigger issue that I see is that we have an aging demographic in Massachusetts. We will need many, many more healthcare workers over time. And beyond the hospital context, we talked about home healthcare and home healthcare aides will be even more key. And we don't have enough people who are willing to work at those low wages. So there's a whole scheme out there that needs to be played through. So I think in my mind, what you're touching on is this biggest issue we have in the Commonwealth. I would say our healthcare systems here in Massachusetts, we're all like proud of. Right? And we are here because actual healthcare we get is outstanding. We cannot let that go. And that means we need to workers, we need to train them. And as you know, the shortage of nurses as well as home healthcare aides, and those are two big ones that come to my mind. And as you look at the report, the single biggest gap we saw was in healthcare workers. Because the rest, if you look at AI and all of that, with due respect, we may not have the skills, but the free markets will make its work through, right? But for the healthcare workers, it's a much bigger issue.
Well, I apologize for running a little bit over time, but this conversation was just so rich that I thought that it was okay. And please join me in thanking our panelists. Sure that on the way out, for those that didn't get to ask questions, you may be able to grab one of them, get your question, and I apologize for that. But some really terrific insights about making the workplace a place people want to go, providing purpose, the magnet, not a mandate, the flexibility on the manager side. Just tremendous insight. So thank you all, and to all of you, have a great day and a